the City of Santa Clara's Worker Cooperative Initiative. It's run by a collaboration of a few different organizations, including Project Equity, Democracy at Work Institute, Sustainable Economies Law Center, and the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives. We're very happy to have you here. We're extremely excited to be working on this collaboration with the City of Santa Clara, and I'm very excited to have all of you here for what I know will be a really great discussion. So today, as you can see, you'll hear a little bit from me and the work of the Federation, and you'll also hear from Donna. You want to give a wave here from Project Equity. So Donna will be sharing her expertise from having worked in the field. And we also have a presentation from David Wilmore, who is from Robyn et al., which is a converted cooperative. We're very excited to have a very personal view, so you can hear directly from someone who's actually gone through the experience, which is always, I think, very illuminating. I think if you're going through the process, it's always very helpful to hear directly from the source, right? So I want to encourage all of you to get questions ready. We'll have time for questions at the end. I encourage all of you to use, there's a chat/question box that should be coming up with your GoToWebinar screen. So I encourage you to add questions anytime, and then we'll pull those together for the end of the presentation. And we'll have Donna, myself, and David around to answer questions, as well as Robyn from the city. So what we're going to do today is give you a strong kind of just like a baseline for what is worker ownership, why the time is now, why is it so important, and what's the opportunity that we have right now to explore worker ownership, particularly in the City of Santa Clara. What is the power of worker ownership? So really understanding, how worker co-ops can not only be a strong business model for people to make use of, but a way of really anchoring jobs, stabilizing jobs within the community. Then we'll hear from David, and we'll hear a little bit more about worker cooperatives and pathways to worker ownership. Donna's going to share some readiness factors and resources, and then we'll get to the Q&A. So as I said, please at any time feel free to add in your questions. We'll be addressing as many as we can during the session. So that's it. And with that, I'm actually going to hand it over to Robyn Sahid, who is the assistant to the city manager. We're very excited to be working with Robyn closely on this project.
Hello, thanks, Mo. Good afternoon, everyone. As Mo said, I'm Robyn Sahid. I'm as an assistant to the city manager with the City of Santa Clara, and I have the pleasure of leading some of our key economic development efforts, including serving as our project lead for this worker cooperative initiative. On behalf of the City of Santa Clara and our team, I want to welcome you to today's event, and I thank you for attending and taking time out of your busy schedules. Santa Clara launched its Worker Cooperative Initiative earlier this year because we recognize it's vital to support our locally owned businesses at risk of closure. Traditional economic development strategies rarely look at succession planning, and through Project Equity's work, we know that Santa Clara has a significant number of businesses approaching the time when owners begin to think about their legacy and what's next. Worker ownership is an option that allows owners to retire well while keeping their business locally rooted and based in our city. And by taking this proactive approach, our goal is to keep these businesses that have grown in our community here and thriving for the long term. We're excited about educating our business community about this option, including providing an opportunity for you to hear firsthand from businesses that have made the transition to worker ownership. And while we started working on this program prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, we believe this initiative will become another valuable resource for our businesses as we begin moving into recovery. Please be sure to keep an eye on our Worker Cooperative webpage for other upcoming events and other resources that are available. There are many resources that are offered by our team that's assembled here, as well as some of our community partners like Mission College, which recently launched a Small Business Institute that offers a suite of classes and webinars, including resources for worker co-ops. And with that, I'd like to hand things back over to Mo. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robyn. I love the enthusiasm. And as Robyn said, this is one session in the midst of many sessions that will be happening throughout the year on the topic of worker ownership. So we want to make sure that all of you feel supported in your interest and your exploration of worker ownership. So there'll be many different opportunities to engage with people who have already done this and developers and technical support people in the field that are able to support you in your journey. I do want to note that this session is being recorded, so just to let all of you know. And so if you would like to watch a recording of it later, that will also be available. And now I'm gonna actually welcome Donna onto the screen. Thank you. And so Donna's just gonna really tee up why worker ownership right now. Like why is this an important option? As Robyn started to share a little bit about.
Great. Hi, everybody. I'm really excited to share why the time is now for worker ownership. So next slide. So just to give a little bit of a background about me and my work. So I am a business engagement and partnership manager here at Project Equity. So if you were to reach out to us, I likely myself or one of my team members will be your first point of contact here at Project Equity. I was also a longtime food manufacturer and business owner myself. So, working with and supporting business owners in any way that I can continues to be something that's really important to me personally and in my work here at Project Equity. So what is worker ownership anyway? Well, when we talk about worker ownership, we talk about it as a business structure in which a broad base of workers or employees who work in the company own it. Stock options are the most common form of employee ownership or worker ownership. You'll hear those terms used. They mean the same, but you'll hear both of those terms, worker ownership or employee ownership, throughout this presentation. But they're usually available only to management. But in contrast, a broad-based employee or worker-owned company gives all workers who meet basic criteria the opportunity to become owners in the businesses they work at. Next slide. So we're in a pivotal time right now, and it's one that creates challenges, but also great opportunity. As business owners, all of you already know that COVID-19 has had a big impact on small businesses. And as recently as last month, almost 80% of business owners said that they're still experiencing negative impact from this global pandemic. So, we're still in it. And to complicate matters more, this is happening at a time when business owners, more than ever, are entering into retirement age and considering their succession plans. So this is known as the silver tsunami and is happening in California, in Santa Clara, and nationally. So nearly half of all privately held job creating businesses are owned by people of retirement age. And as these baby boomers retire, it will impact about 2.3 million businesses and 25 million jobs. So we're talking really big numbers here. But that risk of the silver tsunami also creates an opportunity to think about business retention and ownership differently. Next slide. So legacy businesses and businesses that are owned by baby boomers have a major impact on jobs and revenue right here in Santa Clara. And this follows similar trends as other areas we've studied in the San Francisco Bay Area and other parts of the country. In Santa Clara alone, there are over 1,100 businesses that are over 2 decades old, and they account for over 50% of small business revenue in the city. These businesses also employ about 1/3 of all workers. So, really representing a large number of revenue and the workforce in Santa Clara. Next slide. As business owners, many of you also know that selling a business isn't as easy as it may look on TV or in the headlines. In the Bay Area, and even more so in places like Santa Clara, we may hear stories about those big unicorn companies that sell for millions or even billions of dollars. But it turns out, for most businesses, selling a business isn't easy. In fact, only about 20% of businesses sell, and about 15% transition within families, and that statistic's much lower than it used to be. As well, about 1 in 5 businesses are at risk of closing. So, knowing about different succession options is really important to business owners like you. And, so having an exit option like an employee buyout can offer more choices for business owners. These types of exits provide buyers from within the business a competitive sale price and liquidity, and a path to keep the company and your assets as well as jobs local for generations to come. So employee ownership can also address larger societal and economic issues locally and nationally. Financially insecurity has hit marginalized groups harder, with the racial wealth gap widening during the pandemic. It's become even more clear that during this crisis that workers, especially our frontline and essential workers, are not economically secure. There was a study that came out that almost half of all US families cannot manage a $400 emergency expense, and 6 of the 10 fastest growing occupations pay under $30K a year. As well, there's economists predict that there's an increased period of long-term unemployment ahead, unfortunately, from this pandemic. Next slide. So now I'd like to talk more about the power of worker ownership. Mo, you're going to jump in. Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. As Donna has pointed out, this particular moment, the last year I know has been difficult for all of us, right? And I think what's important to share here is what is the power of this particular business model for this right now, this time, this moment. So worker cooperatives are reliable, they are resilient, and they really help to address some of these really big issues of income inequality and even this unemployment issue that we're thinking about right now. So we did a study last year on how worker cooperatives fared during COVID-19. You're looking at a picture of Brooklyn Packers on the other side of the country. That has been doing a lot around food systems right now, and we've been hearing a lot directly from cooperatives to hear, what has it been like? How's it the same or how's it different than other small businesses? There's still, of course, a lot of the struggles of people trying to understand, what are the relief options that are available, what are the parameters that people need to keep up with for their small business, whether it's in person or remote. And we found out some really interesting stuff. So we learned that 86% of worker cooperatives already had structures in place to quickly make decisions. So we'll talk a little bit more about, what is the business of worker cooperatives look like. But one of the really resounding pieces and one of the integral pieces to the worker co-op model is that people make decisions together. That doesn't mean every decision, but it does mean that people are used to the act of coming together and saying, here's a really big issue for our business. How should we address it? And often these structures allow people that are closest to the problems, people that are frontline, to be able to address those issues. So 86% of co-ops already had structures in place to really quickly make decisions and pivot and figure out together how to deal with either furloughing people, reducing wages so that people could keep their jobs even if it was at a little bit of a lower rate. 93% of the co-ops that we surveyed kept their workers employed. So the majority of them, they kept the exact same workforce. Some people were furloughed but brought back. A few of them reduced hours. And a few of them had to lay off workers, but the majority of them actually brought those workers back after they had a period of being laid off. So pretty strong numbers showing that together these workers were able to make those kind of decisions together for the stability of the entire community, right? And something that we're particularly proud of is that 60% of worker owners are people of color, 62% identify as women, and the majority of worker cooperatives are in industries that tend to be the most insecure. And so, that's your food service, that's childcare, that's home care. We have worker cooperatives across the board in terms of industry and size. But I think it's encouraging to understand that worker cooperatives provide a really direct way to share that really scary burden, especially during a time of crisis when you're trying to make those really difficult decisions. So I'm going to actually pass it back to Donna now to talk a little bit more in more detail about like why worker cooperatives are powerful and provide a really strong opportunity.
Great. Thank you, Mo. Yeah, so I'd like to talk specifically about the benefits of worker ownership for businesses. So specifically, worker ownership can create stronger businesses, can help grow and strengthen the business itself. These worker-owned companies get to experience or have experienced profit margins that are higher than their peers. And what we found on average, those increased profit margins are about 8.5% higher. As well, they enjoy year-over-year benefits. So sales and employment growth is about 2% faster than their peers in the same industry. So, we're talking some real significant and ongoing benefits for worker-owned businesses. As well, worker ownership means quality jobs and more economic security for the workers. So, these data points are also from the study from the National Center for Employee Ownership. Worker owners earn about a third higher wages than their peers in the same industry from a wage perspective. So this is something that's really valuable to the lives of worker owners and their families and the communities they live in. They also stick around in their jobs about 53% longer, which not only creates more job stability and earning continuity for the workers, it also is quite valuable to the business. Having that continuity in your workforce is very powerful to business. As well, the household net worth of these workers is nearly twice as high. So, we're talking about some really important benefits, which turn into big impact for the business as well. Next slide. So we have in our hands here another way to think about business succession and ownership transition. Employee buyouts have many benefits to the business owners and the local community. So this type of sale facilitates owners receiving a competitive sale price for a business that they've built. It's also one that would come with flexible financing as well. An employee ownership transition allows owners to retain influence and pacing for the timeline. So it's very seller friendly, these kind of the exit timeline. And as well, it can preserve the existing company's legacy, the culture and assets in the local community for generations to come. Next slide. So now we're coming to a part of the presentation that I'm looking forward to here today. It's my pleasure to bring in our featured speaker from Rockman et al., David Wilmore. David is the managing director at Rockman et al. He worked with the company founder, Saul Rockman for over 2 decades on operational issues and strategic decision making before transitioning into the lead role on the management team. David was part of the transition team when Rockman became worker-owned and is here today to share insight about the company's journey. So I'd like to welcome David now. David, if you want to come on screen, you're welcome to. If you'd prefer to stay audio, it's fine as well.
Hi, everyone. Oh, it looks like I'm frozen here. Let me see if I can turn that back on. Get a live shot.
Okay.
I don't know why my camera suddenly does not want to work. Oh, interesting. After we did our tech check in the beginning and everything.
Well, we have a great photo of you, so we'll be able. We'll be able to get started, and if your screen comes on, great. So,
okay.
so welcome. Thank you for joining us today. I'd love to kind of dive right in and ask you if you could please tell us a little bit about Rockman and its journey to employee ownership. And then if you could also talk a little bit about the support Rockman had along the way as you transitioned to worker-owned.
Yeah, of course. I had worked with Saul, as Donna had said, for many, many years, and he was of retirement age, and he had been looking for an exit strategy and a way to transition out of the business. Well, let me back up and just say what our business is in a very brief way. We do educational research, and our clients tend to be people who are getting grant funding to do educational projects, and then we come in and we're the evaluation partner with them to provide data to both the project and to the grant funder. So we do these educational studies, and so our employees are all researchers. Apart from myself, and I was the operations person at the company working closely with the owner, Saul Rockman. And when he was looking for these exit strategies, we considered many. He was looking for other competitors that might be able to buy him out, or finding opportunities to sell to someone. We discovered quickly that our business was not considered sort of a turnkey business that would be easy to sell to another group, that the owner, whoever picked it up, would have to be deeply involved in day-to-day operations. So it wasn't like selling sort of a retail operation or something along those lines. And then Saul found an article about Project Equity, I believe in the San Francisco Chronicle, and he reached out to Project Equity and we started having discussions. And it turned out to be a very good connection that we made with Hillary and Patty at Project Equity, and they walked us through the process. We looked at the feasibility, the possibility, whether this was going to work. They took a look at our books and our profitability to see how much money we were throwing off. They talked to Saul as the owner to figure out what he was looking for in a deal and whether or not we could kind of make both sides meet. And we decided that it was a possibility for us to do this. And we worked with Project Equity really hand in hand the entire way through the transition process. And we became a co-op in August of 2019. So it's been about a year and a half, and we just finished up our second fiscal year and did our profit sharing this year, which was great. And things have been going very well. It's been quite successful.
Great. Thank you so much. So you mentioned that you worked with Saul for many years. Could you share a little bit about what changed at Rockman when Saul, the former CEO and founder, exited the business?
Yeah, we ran a very flat organization until we became a co-op. He owned the business. He was the boss of everyone. So he had about 15 people reporting into him. He did not have an extremely active management style. He hired professionals and expected them to do their work professionally, and that's pretty much how we ran the business. So it was extremely flat. And one thing we realized is that he was making the decisions for the business, but he wasn't providing a lot of management, and that through the work with Project Equity and some other consultants that they recommended, we looked at the business in a very holistic way and said, what is it going to take to run this business after Saul is gone? And realized that one thing we needed to do was to build a management structure that could then step in and manage the business. And we were able to do that during the transition period, so that when we became a co-op, we actually had that management structure up and running at that point. And that was one really important piece for us. So that's probably the biggest change to the company. We still do the same work. We're still the same people. You know, the list of researchers hasn't changed very much. We've hired 2 junior people. 1 person has left, but overall it's the same company that it was then, doing the same work. But we have more management than we did before. We're not quite as flat. We have a board of directors now that helps the management group run the company. So there's more of an organizational structure now that helps us look at all the different aspects of business and make good decisions.
Yeah, great, thank you. So, you know, we're in a global pandemic right now, and you know, you're the managing director at Robyn. Through the lens of operating a worker-owned company during COVID, can you talk a little bit about the changes and how you've made decisions now that the company's worker-owned, and are they different? Are they similar? And just a little bit about that in general.
Sure. You know, part of the process of setting up the cooperative, going through the transition process, and this, I have to give a lot of credit to Project Equity. I mean, they did a lot of hand-holding for us, because this was new to us, and they recognized a lot of the elements that would need to be put in place to run a successful cooperative. I can't recommend them enough. One of the elements that they flagged for us and helped us create was our decision matrix. And that decision matrix is a document. It's kind of a living document that breaks a lot of the areas of the business down into different sections and assigns the decision-making authority to different groups. So the board has authority for some issues. The membership as a whole has decision-making authority in some cases. The leadership has decision-making authority in other cases. So when there is something that comes along that we need to figure out, okay, how do we get through this? How is this done? You can refer back to that document and see, okay, the responsibility here belongs with the leadership group. But we also have the responsibility to inform the members and consult with the board. You know, that it's that kind of level of guidance that document provides. And that's really been invaluable for us, because one thing that can be a little confusing for everyone when you become worker owners is, oh, okay, now everyone has all the power. You know, every worker owner gets to run the whole business, and who's responsible for what? This really organizes that into a workable scheme, you know, along with the other founding documents like your bylaws, and some other, you know, other documents that you put forth. But that decision matrix has been really great in keeping us a little more organized.
Great, thank you. And then lastly, I'd like to ask, you know, why do you think employee ownership was a great fit for Robyn? You know, sometimes people have preconceptions around what type of business fit into becoming worker owned, and I'd love to hear why you think it was the right fit for your company.
Well, for one, it allowed us to continue on after Saul retired. I mean, literally continuing to keep our doors open. I don't know what would have happened if we hadn't had this option on the table, and there were no other buyers to come in and do that. It may have been, you know, it would have been completely Saul's decision what to do with the company at that point. And closing the doors obviously wasn't his first choice, but it may have been what ultimately happened. And I know other firms in our industry during COVID, in fact, have had enough trouble that they've decided to close up shop, and they have done that. So the fact that we're still running is one thing that the moving to a cooperative has done for us. But I think more than that, becoming owners after working at an establishment for a long time, and becoming owners along with your coworkers, there's something really neat to be said for that. It's not only financially beneficial, and you put up some slides about the equity that people have in their net worth and that sort of thing, and I think that that's true, and that's great. But there's something about owning the business and knowing that that there is no other person above you that owns the business. You're not working for someone else. You're really working for yourself. And there's a team and there's a structure that helps you move forward, but you own it. And there's a lot of pride there. And I think that is great for both the worker owners and also for Saul, who was the seller of the business. I think he's found a lot of pride in that. We actually just had a retirement party for Saul in December and had a send off for him. And a lot of people chimed in about, hey, how great that you were able to hand off your business to the employees and that they own it now, and you've flipped it into a co-op. I think there's a lot of pride that came from that, and he got a lot of kudos there. So I think it really worked well for both sides.
Thank you. Thank you so much, David, for sharing and insights about this powerful journey. I really appreciate it. And also, for everyone listening, David will be sticking around for the Q&A section towards the end of the presentation.
Thanks, Donna.
Thank you so much, David. It's so wonderful to hear that really personal story about how the journey of moving towards worker ownership has actually worked. And I'm excited to dig into a few more questions when we get to that Q&A at the end. But I think the most valuable lessons are really taken from these in real life experiences. So I think what we want to get into next is, what does the pathway towards worker ownership look like? What does it really take? What are the steps? I think David did a great job of teeing up what that is, what that looked like for Robyn et al. But what could it look like for your business? And I encourage all of you to drop in some questions into the chat. We're happy to answer the broad questions and also specific questions about what that might look like in your industry, for your size business, wherever you're at in the journey. We want this space to be helpful and educational for you, and help you along that journey towards worker ownership. So I will send it right back over to Donna to talk a little bit about pathways to worker ownership and what does it look, how do you know when you're ready? So Donna, take it away.
Great, thank you. So yeah, so next slide. Oh, well, yeah, next slide. So a colleague of mine has coined this saying: if you've seen one small business, you've seen one small business. And that is something that I certainly find true every day when I speak with business owners. Every business is unique, and ultimately the right solution for you when you think about your succession options should be rooted in your unique goals and circumstances. As a business owner, when you think about those options, you have choices, and each have their own benefits. We have found that worker ownership is a path that can check off many boxes for you to meet your goals. A succession plan or an exit through worker ownership, can enable you to preserve your company's legacy, receive a market rate sale price, also keep the jobs of the workers who help build your company preserved in the local community. And it can also have potential tax savings, significant tax savings at times. So next slide. And thankfully, there are examples of worker-owned businesses, a variety of sizes and industries and structures. There are worker-owned companies that range from, a handful of worker owners to several thousand. They are in very varied industries. They also range from companies that have a single location or storefront to having multiple locations in multiple states and cities. So, you know, they can really be varied. Most business types can transition, except medical groups sometimes, you know, can't do that, or other businesses that have legal or licensing requirements. But for the most part, they're pretty open. So again, you know, would just invite you to find out specifically for your business, and we're here to help you explore and discover if it could be a fit for your business. Next slide. So with that, I would like to talk a bit about the readiness factors and the assistance for Santa Clara businesses. So we can go on to the next slide here. So as I shared, each business is unique. So by no means is this an exhaustive list. So if you are interested in worker ownership, I really encourage you, let's talk. We're here for you. But in general, we found the following to be a good indicator of readiness for a company to transition to worker owned. The first being is good financial health. An employee ownership transition, the financing to fund the sale is via a leveraged buyout. So that means that the company is paid for out of future profits. So it's important to have profits and have free cash flow available to do this. As well, having a strong management bench to operationalize the transition is also important. And that can come in a variety of ways. There may be staff in-house now that can transition into some of the responsibility and roles of the current owner. And if there isn't someone in-house that could be developed and to take on that responsibility, we can help you with your search to find a general manager or a new managing director to take on those roles. As well, we found that companies with a proven track record as a strong business with a history of success and projections for continued success is important. So, you know, the goal here is to have a strong business at the start that is strengthened through this type of a transition, so that the newly formed worker-owned business is really set up to, you know, to again be strengthened and to thrive for generations to come. Next slide. So, to speak more specifically about our partnership with Santa Clara. So Santa Clara has made robust services available to you, including educational events, hands-on technical assistance, and transition services, as well as networking guidance. To touch on a few of these services that are available for you, I'd like to point out there's outreach and events. So these are designed to build awareness and provide informational material for you to read and to reflect on as you make your choices around succession planning. As well, technical assistance for exploration is available through direct consultations, feasibility studies, legal services, networking connections, and then deeper dive group workshops and trainings. So really comprehensive technical assistance is available to you. We also have hands-on assistance with transition services, including financing, legal and tax guidance or referrals. There's also help around deal structure and negotiations, employee engagement planning, and workshop support. As well, we work closely with the City of Santa Clara, and you know, there's additional guidance around effective practices for startups, as well as networking and connecting opportunities with existing worker-owned businesses. You know, for a lot of these services, you can contact me directly, as well as connecting with the team that's co-presenting with me here today. There's also SELC can provide legal support services and attorneys, and Mo from the U.S. Federation of Worker-Owned Cooperatives can provide advisory feedback and assistance. So, you know, best practices across worker-owned businesses as well as regional networking. So really, again, like comprehensive services for you available right here in Santa Clara. Next slide. So to access project equity services, resources, and events, you can visit the City of Santa Clara's website. You can also sign up for a consult call with me on the Project Equity website. My email can be found on the city website and as well at the end of this presentation. And I'm looking forward and eager to talking with you about your business. So just as, you know, there's a lot to this in detail in the services, but in regards to time, I'll keep it high level. So basically our project equity includes services, or there's 5 stages, 5-stage transition process that begins with an informal, no commitment consultation, which can then lead to a formal feasibility assessment and end with a guided transition and post-transition support. So full, you know, support, comprehensive support from exploration all the way through to support post-transition to help the newly formed worker-owned business thrive. So, you know, we're here to help you explore what would be the right fit for you and your company. Next slide. So to dig in a little deeper, I'd like to talk a little bit more about the feasibility assessment. So the feasibility assessment is about a 3-month process. During that time, we'll work directly with an owner, and as desired can also include a handful of employees. You know, generally this is a small group, as it's the initial feasibility. Whether employee ownership can work for your business. And the goals of this are to determine the financial feasibility around what debt burden your company can take on to establish a potential sale price. It also, during this phase, we develop a straw model of a new employee-owned version of your company that can be used to get initial feedback and early commitment from your full workforce. So, you know, we also during this phase assess the management needs on the conversion, but it really helps to give you a full picture of, you know, again, what a newly formed employee-owned version of your company could look like, and really inform you as you make your decision on what could be the right next step. So next slide. So with that, I'd like to just go over a few key facts about the transition process before I pass it back over to Mo. So what actually happens when a company transitions? And well, what happens is that an existing company sells to a newly formed worker-owned entity. So there's a sale. This is a sale transaction. So the current company sells to a newly formed employee-owned business. This purchase can be financed by a loan taken out by the company, paid out over time through future profits. So the individual workers do not need to have the funds to make this purchase. It is taken, the business itself takes out the loan to finance the sale. And most transition businesses retain management, often with worker owners electing or serving on the board of directors. So the workers who become worker owners, you know, can sit on boards and continue to run the company from their seats on the board, but the day-to-day management can largely stay the same. So with that, I would like to pass the baton back over to Mo. And of course, if you have additional questions to dig in deeper, we can, you know, go through those in the Q&A.
Great, thanks, Sana. I see a couple questions starting to trickle in here. I encourage you to add questions into the chat. And also, we actually have a good group here, and I also invite you, if you have a question, you can raise your hand, and we'll unmute you and let you ask the question directly. All right. So I'll just start us off first, though, by sharing a couple of upcoming events. As we said in the beginning, this is a trajectory of a set of sessions in order to support people through the journey of moving towards worker ownership. So there are so many resources out there. As a representative from the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives, we're the network that helps to make sure that there's a really strong sense of support and people that you can go to, peers that you can talk to understand what does this look like. So there's a couple events coming up that we want to share. Every month, the Federation hosts a worker co-op startup webinar. So that gives a really in-depth look of what Donna started to share in terms of what does the pathway to worker ownership look like. The startup webinar gives you some of the baseline that you need to really understand what is it like to make decisions together, how do you delegate, how do you divide up decision making, and how do you even start this conversation about sharing ownership of a business together. Coming up in May, we'll have a forum called Why Did I Sell? We're going to be hosting that along with Project Equity. It's going to be a different kind of session that's a little bit like an expanded version of what we did with David, which is hearing from a couple of different worker owners, people that have either sold their business or are currently an owner within the business, to just have more of an open forum so that you can ask some of the deeper questions that might be rising up for you. And then in June, we're going to be hosting a worker co-op fundamentals session, which is kind of a little bit of a deeper version of the startup webinar. We'll talk a little bit more about conversions. We'll talk very specifically about some of the resources that are available to you as residents of Santa Clara. So make sure that you keep an eye on the Santa Clara website, santaclara.ca.gov/worker cooperative. You'll be able to access all of the resources and all of the upcoming events around this worker cooperative initiative. So with that, I will invite David to come back on the screen, and Robyn, if you are there. Robyn, again, is the assistant to the city manager, and so that we can start to tackle some of these questions. Maybe I'll start off with a question from the audience, which is, what are the responsibilities of the new worker owners? How does their jobs change? And I think this would be great for either David or Donna. Maybe we'll start with David, and then we'll move over to Donna just to kind of share a little bit more.
How does their job change? It really depends on whether or not a particular worker owner is on the board, or if they are just continuing to do their work and show up to member meetings, which in our case, we're having twice a year, in which case they're able to share their thoughts and gather information about how the company is being run. But if you're on the board, then you've got a bigger schedule and you're meeting more often in order to talk about the things the board talks about, which is kind of the mission and vision of the company, and also the evaluation of the managing director, and issues that the members want to be addressed. So the board comes together to talk about those things and make sure that management is handling the things that they're supposed to handle. We also, as I mentioned, sort of formed a whole management structure in our organization, which didn't exist before. So we're having a lot more meetings and one-to-one meetings. People are getting more management support, and they're setting more goals in terms of their career. We also had a compensation study done, so that this is the first thing the members wanted done was a compensation study to make sure our pay was equitable in the company. So there's been a number of changes, but honestly, for the most part, we found that it was really important for us to focus on doing the work that we had already been doing. So most of people's time is still doing the research, working for their clients, doing the research projects that they do. That's the most important thing. So there is a little bit of change for a few people, especially if you're on the board, but mostly you still have your job and you do your best job.
Thanks, David. That's really helpful. And also tease up me being able to share my favorite statistic about worker co-ops, which is, the typical corporation in the U.S. Has a pay ratio of 320 to 1, whereas the typical pay ratio between the highest paid worker and the lowest paid worker at a worker cooperative is 2 to 1. So I think raising these issues of pay equity and transparency around how pay works and how wages work within businesses is a really important one. It gives people more of a ability to have say in how that works within the place that they work, which is I think really exciting and important. So Donna, do you have anything that you want to share to add to David's comments?
Yeah, I mean, essentially that, what we found specifically for co-ops, the management can be maintained. The management structure can be maintained. However, there are opportunities then for the workforce to take part in the governance, and that can be everything from voting for a board of directors and as well as serving on the board of directors. So, getting to have a say in making these kind of governance type decisions and influence the governance type decision, we found has been really powerful for the workforce of worker-owned co-ops.
Thanks, Donna. Because this initiative is really focused on the city of Santa Clara. Robyn, I'm wondering if you can share a little bit. I know you mentioned some of the initiatives and pieces of this big this project that we're working on together. I was wondering if you could share a little bit about like how businesses can expect support from the city of Santa Clara if they are choosing to go down this path towards worker ownership.
Sure. Thanks for the question. So right now we're really in the phase of getting the information out there, getting our business community educated and aware about this as an opportunity. We realize that it's not going to be a fit for every business, but we want businesses to know that this is an option. So right now we've pulled together a great team of experts that we want to connect businesses with if they're interested in learning more. We're obviously going to be hosting webinars like this and then more technical specific focused webinars in the coming months. So we want businesses to attend those and learn more, but we can obviously connect you with our partners that we have on board to engage with you and learn more. And as we progress with this initiative, we're going to be looking at ways the city can continue to support businesses moving forward. So whether that's, further assistance with trying, feasibility analysis or transitioning to even worker cooperative, those are some of the things we're going to be exploring. It's not a guarantee of what we're going to be able to do, but we're doing that now. And we have Democracy at Work Institute that's helping us kind of look at our internal city policies and making recommendations on how to build a sustainable program going forward so we can continue to offer this and support our businesses that may want to transition or looking for more information and moving forward with this as an option.
Thanks,
I
Robyn.
hope that answered your question, but let me know.
It absolutely did, and I just want people to really understand, that this is an effort that the city is committed to, and I also want to applaud the city of Santa Clara because this is the city is really one of the front runners in this work across the country in terms of really dedicating resources towards helping small businesses. I think we're in this moment of really how is the government helping small businesses? How are we going to make sure that these businesses stay open, keep these jobs stable? And I just want to applaud the city for rising to the occasion and ensuring that there is support for business owners and people who want to build wealth even and come out of this pandemic with real opportunities for themselves and their communities. So I see one more question that we can tackle. I know we're right around time, but we could do this one more question. In terms of governance of the business, what do committees look like? For instance, I know a lot of cooperatives have a finance committee and a maybe like an outreach committee. I'm wondering, David, if you could share a little bit about like what committees, if any, does Rockman have? How often does the board meet? Just to get a sense of some of the logistics of that, and then maybe Donna and I can share a little bit about what we know about some other businesses that use the work quote model.
Sure. Well, as I mentioned, along with having a board of directors, which in our case meets monthly, in our bylaws it says we will meet at least quarterly, but we have found it actually really beneficial for that group to meet more often in this first year and a half at least of our existence. And so they've been meeting monthly. Then we have our leadership team, which is essentially 4 directors, myself and 3 others, and we meet once a week. And that's about making all kinds of decisions around personnel and HR, which projects we're going after, workload, et cetera. But then we do have a couple of informal committees, places where we've needed some help, or we need to put a little manpower into our company that can't all come from the leadership group. So we have a technology committee, and so we look at the different softwares that we use and who's got those licenses, and trying to manage, you know, our project management software and that sort of thing. And then we have a communications committee that is responsible for updating our website, tweeting, you know, doing social media and that kind of thing, making sure that the work that we do is getting out to a fresh new audience. So essentially, those are the committees that we've formed so far.
Well, thanks so much, David. I will share a little bit of, you know, just I think a good example of some committees that I've seen. You know, the beauty of a worker co-op is you can kind of decide what's the needs of the business and what committees do we need. There's a cooperative called New Moon in Olympia, Washington that has they have a food committee, a marketing, events, and outreach, and whatever, they actually call it the Meow Committee, which I think is really fun. They also have an operations committee and a finance committee. So, you know, they really break up the work and ensure that people have an opportunity to learn. I think one of the most exciting things is really building business skills, right? So helping people to understand finances better and be more participatory in the work of really running the business, and giving people kind of like a peek into like what does it really take to run the business, because, you know, as an employee you might not get that full view, but as a worker owner you really get to understand and build your leadership skills and build your business skills. So I'm wondering, maybe as we can close out the session, David, I'm going to pick on you one more time. If you could just close us up in thinking about the workers. I know you've talked a lot about, you know, the people are really, you know, able to really focus on the work, which is really exciting. Have you noticed anything about how the workers are engaged in the business itself? Do you feel they're more engaged? Is the company performing better? I'd love to leave this session just with an understanding of, you know, like, you know, from a dynamic perspective and a company temperament perspective, how has it felt since you've made this transition?
Well, again, with the new management that we've put in place, there's a lot more support for people. We didn't used to have a really regular system for support. People would walk in and they would, you know, say, "Hey, Saul, how are you doing?" You know, and then have a conversation with him, and that was his management style. Now we actually have managers and managees, and we have, you know, normal, regular one-on-one meetings. So people are getting a lot more support in terms of their career goals and their paths, along with professional development. We actually have a director of professional development, so people have, you know, ongoing learning plans to become better at what they do. And so I think that extra touch that we have now that was not there before is really a big change for us. You know, the ownership and the financial side, again, really great. We've been quite successful in the last year and a half, which has been really great. We're, you know, I consider us fairly lucky in that regard. COVID didn't really take us down. We've had to make some shifts and shuffles. So we have been successful financially, But I think that management support is probably the biggest change that I've seen in terms of just how the company is run. That you know, we're taking it by the reins a little more.
Thank you, David. What a great way to round out the session. I think you know, getting a peek into like what are the different ways that, you know, you as the workers were able to spot different ways to make the work experience better for the people within the business. That's really exciting. So that we're right at time, folks. Maybe a little bit over. So we really appreciate you taking time to participate in Work Ownership 101 today. We encourage you to check out the website. Again, that's santaclaraca.gov/worker cooperative to learn about the upcoming events and additional resources that we have available. You'll get a follow-up email with a bunch of resources in it. So no worries on that front. I encourage you to sign up for a free consultation with Donna. And if you're interested in partnering with the city, definitely reach out to Robyn Sahid at santaclara.gov. So thank you again, everyone, for your time and for your curiosity on the topic of worker ownership. We're really excited to be working in the city, and we hope to see you again at the next session.
Bye-bye.